Welcome to Spirit Journey Collective. I'm your host, Sarah Ty. Get ready for compelling conversations with guests of all walks of life who believe they have found their purpose. Together, we will uncover unique backstories, hearing the raw experiences that led them to the work they are doing today. Let's expand our minds together with the captivating stories and inspiration that awaits. Thank you again for joining me for another episode of Spirit Journey Collective. I have a really unique guest here today. I'm really excited to dive in and learn more about everything she offers. She is a psychic medium and a death doula, which for those of you who are listening, you might be thinking, well, what's that? If you've heard of a doula for pregnancy and birth, it's similar, but about the other side, which we'll get into, but it's more like assisting people in passing. And I'm just so fascinated by everything here that she offers. So thank you so much for being here today, Dominique.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
I've been looking forward to our conversation. So why don't we start with telling us a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, and what you offer.
Well, my name's Dominique. I work as a medium and a psychic, and as you mentioned, a death doula. I've kind of done it my whole life, literally my entire life. We connect those that have crossed over with those that are still living in this world with their loved ones. We work with one-on-ones, group readings, gallery readings. We've attended expos and seminars, and we just really enjoy having this conversation with people and kind of having a platform to do it on. So it's always a good time. It's always a fun conversation, and no 2 days are alike. So it's always fun.
Yeah, that is awesome. So I guess my next question is, how did you find this path? So I know you mentioned you've always been doing this. So were you born with this gift, and like becoming a death doula, was that just kind of part of what your natural gifts were?
I was definitely born as a medium ever since I was a very, very small, like pre-elementary school small. I've always been able to see my guide. And luckily I had a very unconventional mother, grandfather kind of situation. And they realized very, very early that what I was able to do. And they really supported it, which is game changing. A lot of people don't get that. So I totally give them a ton of credit for understanding my like level of being different, uniqueness, and completely supporting it. As far as a death doula, my mom did a lot of end of life care for individuals, and she was a single mom. I was taken with her most of the time. So it was a very normal part of my life. And I think as I became older, I think becoming a certified death doula was just kind of another step in this line of work.
That is fascinating. I can't imagine being a young child being introduced to death so young, but on one hand, like death is going to happen to everyone. It really should be more normalized. So that's good that you had that environment of just accepting your gifts for what they were and what they are.
Absolutely. I think that's the biggest issue we have now is death is such a weird taboo topic we don't talk about. And then therefore it makes it even more uncomfortable for people. And until we break that like stigma of death and talking about death, it's not going to change. So I take every chance I get to advocate talking death and grief and getting comfortable being uncomfortable in it.
I think that's important. It's something that, again, it's going to happen to everyone. And I think there's a lot of fear around death. Personally, I used to be very afraid of the idea of death. And since I've found my spirituality, and I'm also a spiritual energy worker, I'm a channel/tarot reader. So I'm already kind of in similar work. I've been told I'm a medium as well. I have not tapped into that side of me yet, though. I think I've had like experiences that confirm that, but I'm not quite ready to open that door. But like in the rest of the things that I've done, I've definitely felt like, oh yeah, there's something else. There's another side. There's something we're going to transition into. So I'm less afraid of it, but I think most people who don't have that anchor in some kind of faith, the idea is terrifying. And so that's probably why it's such a taboo topic.
Right. I've seen people who are deeply rooted in their faith and like have spent their whole lives dedicated to their religion or church or whatever. But when that moment comes, they're absolutely terrified. I think it's the unknown, us being afraid of being alone, taking the step completely by ourselves. And I think that's a huge, huge thing that people need to remember is that nobody walks home alone. And we are all just walking each other home, right? And we will walk people home as far as we can. And then the other side, they will have someone come and take them the rest of the way. But it's still the fear of the unknown. That's very scary. And I'm sure that's definitely rooted in a lot of people's fear of death. And then there's the concept of leaving behind your family and loved ones and, regrets and all the stuff that comes with a human experience.
Yeah, which actually that does make me curious about another question that plugs more into your mediumship. And you mentioned that
been a medium since you were a young child, and your mom worked in end of care services. So you were probably around a lot of people who were passing a lot when you were younger. I've heard from several different sources that as we're getting ready to pass, a lot of the times the people will actually start to see their loved ones that have passed. And so did you get a chance to like experience seeing loved ones coming for those that were like ready to transition?
All the time, all the time, all the time. And you can definitely tell, like, I absolutely adore and love and respect our hospice workers, that we are two different sides of the same coin. Like, they do the medical part and they understand that, and we do the spiritual part and all of that. But they can even tell you when a loved one starts seeing their loved ones that have crossed over, we're like, yeah, you guys need to start pulling people in to start saying their goodbyes. It's happening soon. We will definitely see the transition begin. You'll start seeing those steps leading up to it for sure.
Wow, that's incredible. Were you as a child ever able to see the same spirits that those that were passing would see?
Sometimes I can feel them for sure. And if they want to show up for me, they will. It's not quite like how Hollywood makes it out. Like, I see somebody who's passed over just like I see you, but I can see there's a layer in between us. So I can tell who's living and who's not if we're all standing in a room together. But I can definitely tell when they're there. You can feel it in the room when somebody had somebody that's coming to them. I think it's kind of a trade-off that I've talked about a lot before, is I cannot see my own loved ones that have passed over. My mother's passed over, like everybody except for my children have passed over to the other side. Thank God. So I cannot see them and connect with them like I can with one of my clients' families. So when my grandmother was passing, she kept talking about seeing her sister. And I'm like, I don't see her anywhere. So I don't know if it's because that's my family and they're like extended from that. So I can't. But normally I can tell with a client if they have somebody close by. We can normally feel it pretty easily.
That is interesting. It makes me think of like, you're close to them, right? Like what is that saying? Like, it's like you can't see the whole forest when you're in the forest.
Yeah. You can't see the forest from the trees. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so maybe it's something like that.
Maybe. I've had some, in my opinion, some of the best psychics that are alive today. And I've had some really cool readings with them. And every one of them is like, they're like, I see your mom, but she's telling me to mind my own blank and blank and blank and business. I don't know what kind of language you allow on your podcast. But yeah, she will quickly shut them down. And these are very big people in the paranormal community. And I'm like, yeah, accurate. That sounds like my mom. But I think it's just a trade-off, and it's part of, I get to do this work for other people, so I know they're okay. So I think it's reserved for people that need that validation and confirmation.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you're not seeking and needing that messages and the connection all the time, then from what I understand, when we pass over, we have jobs to do. We're doing other things. So it's like, there's no point in wasting their time with you if you're not grieving and needing them.
Right. Now, I will absolutely say they're still around. I can tell, like I can smell them. They'll give me signs like everybody else, but I can't see them the way I see other people's clients. And I think it's kind of funny. My mom will show up and send weird songs, or weird food stuff will pop up. I'm like, oh, that's definitely my mom. Or my grandpa will send random tree frogs in places tree frogs should not be. So I know that they are from them, but I know for a fact that's just part of the trade-off, I think. And I'm okay with it. It's all right.
So when you do readings and you do psychic medium readings, do you actually, when they communicate with you, are they speaking to you? Are they like, when you see them, are they able to speak to you like we're speaking right now?
It's different for everybody. Everybody's very different. Some people can only hear things or feel things or smell things, and that's all fine, but we are all very different. I will have a conversation with them just like I'm having a conversation with you. Very normal, and I really enjoy it. I think it's such a cool opportunity that I get given every single day, and I would not know what to do with myself if it wasn't like that. I really do not. But yeah, they'll normally show up. I'll talk to them like I'm talking to you. I can describe what they look like and like the weird like dialect they may have or specific phrases they use. And then they'll normally walk me through their death and then directly after their death. So that's normally how they show up and share their messages with me.
That's so cool. I have a friend who's also a medium, and for her, it's sometimes she sees them, sometimes she sees pictures, but a lot of the time it's like they drop random pictures in her mind that she has to decipher. So that's been kind of fascinating watching her navigate that. Like, I don't know, this is what they're showing me. Does this make sense to you? And it's like, oh my gosh, yes, that makes sense to me.
Before I get to a client session, if I'm on my way to meet them, if during my drive, I will start getting pictures kind of like that. And it turns almost into like a Rolodex of pictures where one will drop and then two, and then they'll start spinning sort of, and kind of like an old movie type thing. But by the time I get there, I'm like, oh no, there you are. I found you. Okay, we're good. But I get messages pretty much constantly unless I kind of be like, okay, guys, I'm off work. But even then sometimes they'll get a little pushy, but For the most part, it's, talking to him just like I'm talking to you.
Do you feel like you found your purpose in the work that you do?
Absolutely. I know for a fact this is what my soul's supposed to do in this lifetime. Not even a question about it. I think everybody has many purposes in their life. And I think we all think it's the one big thing we do, but it's really the little things we do every single day that we might not even realize we're doing it. But those are hands down like what our purpose is every day. As far as what my job's supposed to be and how I'm supposed to help people, like the bigger picture, absolutely, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
So what would you say is your purpose, and what is it about what you do that lights you up?
I think giving validation, compassion, and grace to those on the other side and to those that are here. I cannot heal you. Nobody in this world can heal you. That is your personal job to do. But if I can walk with you to find your path to healing, it's absolutely a huge, huge special thing to me that I'm allowed inside that sacred intimate space. But helping people get their validation and understanding, just sharing that with them is hands down like the greatest, absolute greatest purpose I could have.
That's beautiful. And especially, I think your line of work specifically is so unique and not one for everyone, right? It's definitely, I feel like psychic medium, there are a lot of those out there, but I feel like when you combine the psychic medium with being a death doula, a death worker, it's more of a niche that I don't think a lot of people necessarily do.
Normally people are one or the other. We are just kind of an all-in we just go all in. It's just how we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, a lot of people are psychics and they're not mediums at all. So just because somebody's a psychic does not make them a medium. A medium is somebody who connects to the other side. A psychic is somebody who can get messages that can pertain to your questions and past, present, future. Normally a medium is a psychic as well.
I've definitely heard that. Like not every psychic is medium, but every medium is a psychic. Which makes sense. If you're, plugged in enough to be able to touch in with the other side, why wouldn't you be able to do that here on the physical plane?
Right. And I think with death work in general, it's having a woman I spoke to a couple of years ago during an interview. She said that she had heard about a positive death movement. And I was like, that's exactly what death doulas are. They've been around for years, but we've never had the acknowledgement. And they're finally starting to be part of this light that's getting shined on them finally. So it's a really cool work. And I think you're going to start seeing a whole lot more of them now. I really do.
There should be more because it's just taking like hospice care to the next level, right?
Well, hospice, we can't administer medication. We don't work with the doctors. We don't work with the medical staff. We work with our client and their family that's supporting them. That's who we work with. I mean, but really our only really big goal is to work with our client and advocate for them and help them however they need. But I think family support around that is a really big part of it as well.
Yeah. So basically you're like the emotional support. The hospice is the staff and the medical team. Mm-hmm. And you're the one that's right there, like holding their hand and talking, about like what to expect. Something you had said in another podcast interview I listened to, which I just loved, was you basically help die with their dignity.
And honestly, hospice nurses are the same way. They do a lot of unsung work. They're incredible. And I've never met a hospice nurse that didn't love me being there. And I've never met a hospice nurse that I didn't love being there, because we do two totally different services, and I will work with people years before they pass and help them figure out their options and what they want and have these uncomfortable conversations with their loved ones and what they want to have happen with their bodies afterwards. And once somebody passes, the hospice nurse is out, like they're done. They'll wrap everything up and medically they're done. We are still very much involved after that.
That makes sense, because after the transition, now it's kind of like, now it's your turn to work with the family, move forward.
Yeah, we also do it. I mean, everything is ready, is preparing your body and wrapping it. If you want to have a green funeral, then prepare you and wash you and do all the things. We're part of all of it, the whole process from beginning to end.
So that's even kind of like mortuary a little bit, right? Like that part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's fascinating. I'm, again, since I found my spirituality, I'm less afraid of death. I'm less afraid of the idea of it, because I do believe there is something else in all of that. But I do think there's still that, it's still like a taboo topic, thinking about being there with someone, holding their hand, helping them transition, and then being there as they as you prepare them for their ceremony and everything else. Is that hard for you to be in that space?
No, it's very natural for me. I'm not freaked out of looking over at a body that's transitioned. They're no longer there. It's just like the car we rode around in this lifetime. I think I'm very humbled, and I'm so grateful that they're allowing me and trusting me in that space. I don't have time to be weirded out by it. This is important work. This is really sacred work. So we try really hard to be present in it. And it's just very special. It's very special.
Between mediumship and being a death doula, do you like or enjoy one more than the other?
I love all of them. I think mediumship fills spiritual side more. I think a death doula part is just honoring the human experience that we have. If I had to pick one over the other, I would pick mediumship over a death doula, just because that's all I've known my whole life.
That's beautiful. And I mean, that's like we're here as humans, right? And I think that a lot of the times, especially when it comes to passing, there's just this kind of like, again, it's this taboo topic around it that's just, you don't really get a chance to honor someone, especially as they're passing. I think it's more like you don't really honor people, you don't really honor yourself while you're alive. Like that's something that obviously needs to change too. But then you honor after they pass. But what about that transitional piece? Like no one talks about it. And so it sounds like you just get to be that bridge between life and death, and that literally the transitional period.
Yeah, we love to hold that sacred space. And that's exactly what it is. It's a very sacred space. And it's I think it's really honorable work. And I'm so glad that more people are starting to dive into it, because there's so many levels of a death doula. You can be just as somebody who helps you figure out your options. That's all you do. You're not there for the actual death. You have people that go all the way through and become funeral directors, and that's beautiful too. I think that's so cool about this job, because there are so many layers and so many faucets, and every single person is a little different, and they're all going to do things in their own way, and they're all pulled to different experiences and how to support it. But regardless of the job that you're doing, you could have 10 people with the same title at a table, and all 10 people are going to bring something totally different. And you just find the energy that matches yours, and that's where you go.
So how do you navigate naysayers? I mean, like, especially in the death doula arena, do you have family that push back against what you're doing there? Do you ever have any issues with that?
I am a huge skeptic myself. I believe 90 to 95% of the people in this line of work are frauds, and they're feeding off of people's anguish and grief and trauma and pain. So I'm a huge skeptic. So I fully respect a skeptic. I love when I have a skeptic come to get a reading with me, because normally they're not the ones that set it up, and their friends are just dragging them along, and they're like rolling their eyes. They're my favorite. Like, we get each other, and they always end up being the best readings. They're so much fun. And I think it's just spirit showing off, like, okay, let me just show you. And it's always so much fun. I love it. And being from the South, it's a huge stigma here. Like, that's a big no. We didn't talk about that for years and years and years. And the rest of my family was very much against it. Like, my mom was like, don't talk about it. We don't talk about that stuff. So it's a very in the house kind of conversation, except for the people that knew about it. But really, I think it's a real blessing, is as I got older, I realized that the world is changing in the best way possible in some ways. And it's really allowing different perspectives to come in. And it's a great thing. It's very wonderful. But I love a skeptic. They're my favorite. Hands down. I love them.
I know 100% as far as that change. That's one thing that I've very recently had my spiritual awakening. It was during 2020. Like, I've been listening to different podcasts, like kind of figuring out what I believe, all of that stuff. And one thing I keep hearing is the paradigm shift. About like 10 years ago, a lot of the things that are more mainstream now would not have been. It's more out there. And while there's still a lot of taboo around it, and I know the difference, because like when I do like a farmer's market versus an event I'm hired for, the farmer's market, people made me like the plague. They'll like make a huge arc around my booth, like, oh no, so I just know I'm going to attract the people who need to talk to me at those ones. But then I go to an event where I'm hired and I'm kind of endorsed by the person who hired me. People are curious. So it's like, it's definitely still taboo, but I do think there's a movement happening that's like opening up. Yeah, it just seems like it's getting a little bit more mainstream and more talked about and accepted.
Right. And especially if you're invited to events, I think some of my favorite events have been like corporate events and bachelorette parties and baby showers. And I'm like, you are my people, because this is what you do for fun. Like, I love it. But I think when they are coming to an event and we're already there, they've already been given permission to be open-minded to it. And because somebody else is giving them permission to do it, it kind of like spreads. And it's a really great time.
And I think that there's also that element of like, oh, well, it's just entertainment, until they actually sit down with you and they're like, oh, maybe it's not just entertainment.
Right.
And that's one thing that, like, I do know there are readers who do lean more into the entertainment side of things, but that's one thing that I'll be very clear about. Like, I don't do the gypsy getup. I don't, I will dress nice for the event. And if there's a small theme, I might add something to it, but it's not going to be, it's not a show. And it's spiritual guidance. And it doesn't matter if I'm being paid to do it at a baby shower or if I'm doing it with a one-on-one client, I'm going to treat it the same way.
probably about 10, 15 years ago, I stopped trying to dress and talk and walk like everybody else in this line of work. I stopped wearing like the boho pants and the flowy stuff. I'm like, no, it's just not it. It's just not it for me. So I'm normally in like a pair of like kind of like jeans that have like holes in them and like snarky t-shirts, and I'm comfortable in it. And because I'm comfortable, my clients are immediately 10 times more comfortable. And when we show up as our authentic self, I think it makes them feel a little bit more trust for us, because we're obviously not trying to be somebody we're not.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's something that like I did kind of learn because when I stepped into this work, I mean, I've been a tarot reader for myself for like 20 years, but I started
Mhm.
reading professionally about 3 years ago. And that was one thing I kind of learned from other different readers and stuff was like, no, I'm going to read the way that I feel called to read. And I'm just going to,
Yeah.
and I mean, it took me, I mean, it did take trial and error, but then I kind of like learned like, no, nope, I'm going to show up the way that I'm supposed to show up. This is my
Yeah.
gift. The reason why it's my gift. So I'm going to lean into the gift and less into like the making people believe that I'm gifted. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What they think of me is not my business. I don't care. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
I just don't care.
It's time to take a short break from our wonderful speaker. Are you in the need of guidance around love, career, family, life, or purpose? Embark on a spiritual journey inward with an intuitive tarot reading. Depending on what you're needing and looking for, I offer private one-on-one sessions as well as personalized email readings. It doesn't matter what the question is. A reading with me provides connection with your higher self, offering curated personal messages, or what I like to refer to as spiritual roadmaps, guiding you to the future outcome you desire. Readings are insightful and affordable. If you'd like more information or to schedule a reading with me, please see the link below.
So you did mention how skeptics are your favorite. You have a story or two about how you had like a skeptic who was like a total non-believer, but by the time they left, they were a believer.
We got a few of those. They're probably my favorites. They are always my favorites. The first one I talk about all the time is because I have one guide I've had my whole life. He's always been there. And she was the next guide that she's not really a guide. I kind of call her my hostess with the mostest, because she will randomly pop in. And when she pops in, I know my calendar is about to get flipped upside down. She's going to just change my whole plan for the day. But this was, oh gosh, years and years ago. I went to a large group and there's about 50 people there to do a big gallery reading. And the woman that owned the property walked up to me and she's like, listen, I'm letting my friends use this space, but I believe in God. And I think what you're doing isn't aligned with God. And it's just not for me. So don't talk to me. Don't send me. I don't want to do with it, but I'm letting my friends use the space. And I'm like, cool. I respect that. And boundaries set up. I love it. That's totally fine. But after several hours of being there, I kept watching the spirit run back and forth behind this woman. But every time she ran past her, she looked different. But I could tell the energy, like the essence was the same, but they were just dressed wildly, like masks, hair. Like I was like, I don't know. I don't know about this girl. I don't know who she is, but she's very much trying to get my attention. And by the end, I walked up to her. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I don't ever cross a boundary like this. And I know you said you don't want a reading, but I have to mention this woman that's behind you. And she keeps changing her wigs and like crazy outfits and like fishnets with like neon green vests and this and that. And the woman just broke down sobbing. And she's like, that's my daughter. And I was like, oh, well, she's not left you alone. And she's all up in literally making laps around her. She loves it. But she wouldn't say anything to me, but she just kept showing up and dressed wildly. She was like, yeah, she had special needs and she was nonverbal in life. And she said, but she's very much will come in and she would just take over everything. But every day she would come out of her bedroom dressed in the wildest stuff, crazy makeup, crazy wigs, mismatched clothes every day, trying to go out in public. And her mom was like, no, Cindy, we're not doing this. So it was very much how we changed her whole perspective of it. And to this day, she's one of my greatest clients. She calls me every few months and is like, hey, I'm having a get together. Can you come do a reading for this group of people? So years, like well over a decade or two, like it's been a long time. And they're absolutely fantastic. We've mentioned her several times. She's great. I think the other big one that is pretty fresh, it's been within the last year that we talked about like on our social media, is we had a young man that crossed over. He took his own life, and his mother came to sit with me and her brother came to sit with me. And she's a really big believer in wanted messages. And her brother was there, like rolling his eyes and kind of giving me snarky attitude. I don't care. Like, I'm like, I get it. That's fine. You don't want somebody taking advantage of your sister who's obviously grieving. And he would ask me questions like, well, if that's really my nephew, then what was his favorite car? I'm like, he's not showing me a car. Like, it's never the code word that they said they were going to tell you. That's never what it is. I was like, but he's showing me a red ATV that's like flipping over a hill and rolling down the hill. And his eyes like got big. And I'm like, I don't know about the car, but that's what he's showing me. And he turned and looked at his sister, and his sister was like, what's she talking about? And he was like, well, when we were all riding four-wheelers out at so-and-so's house, and he may have flipped it and rolled down it a few times, but he was fine. So we didn't need to tell anybody. And so that was like the first one that got to him. And then he was like, well, maybe you just seen that somewhere. And I'm like, okay, like, what other question do you have? And he said, I love this. So funny. He's one of my biggest clients now. He texts me every 3 months to get a reading. He said, what's the food the last thing my nephew asked me to cook for him? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I had to sit with it for a minute. And we live at a beach town. And I don't know about where you're from, but people will line the roads with like trucks and cars, like selling seafood out of their cars and trucks like they just caught that morning. And I was like, I see this guy on the side of the road, and he's holding this little black fuzzy thing, and I don't know what it is. And I was like trying to figure it out. It's like, it looks like a sea urchin. And he was like, oh, okay, that's him, because the uncle was going to culinary school to learn to be a chef, and he would ask his nephews like, hey, what do you want me to make you? And the last thing he said is like, you got to make something with sea urchin. And he had a laugh about it and like let it go. But there's no way I could have known that. There's no way anything. And ever since we had that big aha moment with the weird sea urchin, he's been a believer ever since. Like, I think it's really cool that the weird ways people show up. So it's never the big code word that, dad'll tell you, if I die, if I come back, I'll play this song or I'll say this word. It's never that code word. It's never, ever going to be it. It's going to be the random thing that nobody else knows about that's going to make you truly understand that it's them there and not just some random piece of information I'm pulling out.
It's funny how it comes different. I had a similar experience, kind of like just to your point about how it never comes the way you think it will. Mm-hmm. My daughter's dad passed away about mm-hmm. 5 years ago, and we were estranged at the time, but it was still like heartbreaking, and yeah. I've had feelings since his passing. But my friend, who's the medium I mentioned earlier, she every now and again will pick up messages from him and pass them along to me. And it was right after that really horrible shooting in Texas that happened, the Uvalde shooting. I was mm-hmm. Elementary school child, so at me, and so I was like already an emotional mess. And then like I kind of ended up, that turned into, I was standing in my kitchen, and that turned into like me basically having a dialogue with he's my ex-husband, and just basically like, you were supposed to be here, you shouldn't, like right. Like, where did you go? Like, why am I raising my child by myself? Why did you make the decisions you made? Like, I really just kind of right. like talking to myself, kind of hoping he was really there, because otherwise it was crazy. But that night I messaged my friend just through text. Like, I wasn't even emotionally capable of doing like she lives in Illinois. So like, I wasn't even like capable of doing like a video call. It was just, hey, do you have any messages from Corey today? And she gave me a couple that resonated, but it wasn't what I was looking for. I wanted her to say something about my breakdown that day, mm-hmm. right? That's what I was looking for. And she's like, well, he said that you and your daughter were coloring, and he flickered the lights, which was interesting because my lamp did flicker while we were coloring. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, but I need something. In that moment, I needed like hardcore validation. And so then I was like, and the thing that started me going on this rant was this song called "Marry Me" by Train, Brown song in our wedding video. And that song came on out of the blue on my playlist, which started the whole thing, right? Mm-hmm. In my mind, I was just telling him like, you need to somehow correlate that song "Marry Me" and the breakdown. Like, you, like, basically telling him, in right. order for me to really believe that you're here, I need you to somehow correlate that. And I just said it in my mind, and not even out loud. I'm texting my friend, so she can't see or hear me or anything like that. And then she goes, why am I seeing a lake up in the mountains? He proposed to me up in the lake by mountains, and the song's called "Marry Me."
Right, right.
It wasn't as direct as I wanted, but it was direct enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. We never know how it's going to work out or what symbols they're going to give us, but it's always going to be something that's unique to you. I don't believe in people using like the ABCs of mediumship, like, oh, the red cardinal, or, oh, this dragon. Like, no, you need to give me more than that. Like, I want something specific that's unique to that individual. But always go in keeping your mind open if you're willing to look outside of that one, tunnel that you're staring down.
Yeah, I'm also a skeptic. So, I mean, even the things she says that are like spot on, there are still moments where I'm like, I need it. I had another experience with her, which again was kind of another one that's really confirming. I had asked her, like, how did he passed because he was hit by 2 cars. So, I mean, his passing had nothing to do with his addictions, but I knew he was on something, you know what I mean? Right. And so I was asking her, what was the drug? And I was assuming it was something like meth or coke, easy to get to. And she was like, no, he's showing me a pill bottle. She's like I'm feeling like it's like an opioid of some kind. And I was like, oh, it doesn't resonate at all. I never saw him with the pill bottle. He didn't, it didn't resonate at all. And so I was just like, I just assumed it was lost in translation because I know that that's, happens a lot for mediums because of, sometimes you get pictures, so you have to figure out yourself what it means. So I just kind of chalked it up as you're just a little off on that one. And then about 3 months later, his best friend reached out to me just to kind of see how I'm doing. And I asked him, I was like, hey, I have a question for you. What was it that he was using? Do you know? And he was like, yeah, it was oxycodone.
Right.
I was like, all right. No, it was opioids. She was right. And so, yeah, it is interesting how it comes through.
Yeah. Yeah. I get messages from clients from months ago that are like, oh my gosh, I know you don't remember me, but you said XYZ and guess what just happened? So it happens all the time. And that validation is really nice. It is because we talk to so many people every week. I cannot tell you how many. I don't remember the messages. I kind of do like a cookie clearing at the end of every day. I can't hold on to all of it. So it's really nice when we get those validations that come back around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even when you're in this work, it's still sometimes hard to like trust everything. I know, like on my end, I just learned to just say what comes through, but I don't know.
Yeah. I am quick to be like, this makes no sense to me. So I'm just going to tell you exactly what I'm seeing. And normally when I do that, they're like, oh, that makes perfect sense. I'm like, oh, then great. I don't need to understand it. You understand it. And that's about half my conversations during the week, I bet. That's pretty much how it goes.
But that's cool. I mean, that just goes to show it's not you. You're
oh no,
one in the middle, right?
Yeah, just a mouthpiece. That's all we are.
Yeah. So I guess from here, I like to, which we've kind of already done some cool synchronicity type stories, but I do have a segment in my podcast where I call it synchronicity story time, where, because I love synchronicity stories.
I
it
love
just
that.
Feels, and what I've learned is the more that I ask people about synchronicities, the more synchronicities I start seeing in my own life, because now it's like in my mind.
You look for them. Yeah.
Exactly. So I wanted that for my listeners, and then for me, it's also really cool. So for synchronicities, like, do you have any cool synchronicity stories that like kind of either lets you know you're in the right work, that you're doing like what you're supposed to be doing, or do you have, or just in general, some kind of paranormal story you can explain?
I don't believe in accidents at all. I don't believe anything's an accident. Nothing is an accident. And so I think that kind of when we think that way, we're opening ourselves up to see some really cool stuff. I think one of the coolest, I want to say it's kind of a synchronicity, at least in my opinion, is I had a client that I was reading for. I'd never met her before. And I was talking about her dad that had passed over and how his death was tragic and how his life was taken and all this kind of stuff. And he had a big name tied around him. And she was like, yeah, my dad was murdered by a serial killer. And I was like, holy crap, like that's deep. Like, I've never read for a client whose father was murdered by, a serial killer. She's like, yeah, like when I was a very small girl, like that's like the story around our family. I'm like, oh, okay. And I was explaining to her what he was showing me, and he kept showing me a toolbox in the back seat. And I was like, I don't know what it means. She's like, I don't either. I wasn't even born. My mom was pregnant with me. I have no idea. So she brought her mom in for a different session. And I explained everything. And she was like, yep, that's where his car was found. That's who found him. Everything's perfect. Toolbox makes no sense. I have no idea what you're talking about. And it went on like that for about a year, because I would do readings for them just randomly. Well, I guess over a year. We would do readings for them every few months. And out of the blue, her daughter was listening. My client's sister, so the mother's daughter, she has 2 daughters, was listening to a podcast, a true crime podcast. And she heard about the serial killer that everybody assumed had killed her dad. And she called me. She was like, are you sitting down? I was like, nope, but what's going on? She's like, let me tell you what happened. The daughter was listening to a true crime podcast about this man who everybody assumed killed her father. Come to find out, the podcast hosts were talking about how for 2 years, this very famous serial killer had sort of like a little consort that was hanging out with him for 2 years and just riding along. That was also a serial killer, a very famous serial killer, but he killed people by bludgeoning them to death with a hammer is how he would kill them. So she was like, you're not going to believe this. The year that my dad was killed, the months that my dad was killed, he was with them in this part of the country. And his last name is Tool. And I was like, oh, like toolbox? She was like, like the toolbox. And immediately I had this like wave like rush over me, and he showed me the toolbox and all the gory details of what happened, and the toolbox disappeared. And since then he has never come back to me ever again. And I see her all the time because she's a very dear friend of mine now. Like stuff like that changes you and like brings you together. And he has never shown back up for another reading again. But it's that synchronicity of, I talked to her, this is what I was shown. She just happened to be listening to a podcast who just happened to speak about the man who they thought killed her, that happened to talk about a man named Tool that actually killed him. So I think those little things that line up just right, you know? And there's no way that was by accident. No way that was by accident. That the universe lined up all the little pieces to the pawn and just played it out perfectly. So I see stuff like that happen every day, and it's so cool.
Oh my God, that gave me chills. That's
It's
crazy.
so cool. I love it.
I mean, and it's so interesting how they give you what they do. And then it's almost like they know that this doesn't make sense to you yet, but it will. Because from what I understand, and I don't know if how much like, because as a medium and a death doula, you probably, do you have a sense for like what's on the other side? Like, do you have any kind of understanding of what's over there?
I have what I've been shown and what I feel happens. I mean, I guess because I haven't died and come back, I don't know. I have a project I've been working on for a few years, working with clients that have had near-death experiences that have died and then come back. I'm fascinated with it, but they all seem to sort of have the same story. But I know what it looks like from my point of view as a medium, and there's nothing to be scared of at all. The scariest part is releasing here in the unknown. That's way scarier. Once you transition out of your body, it's a piece of cake. But it's always interesting to me to get different perspectives from people and what they feel about it.
Yeah, and I've also heard that like once you release your humanness, basically, that's when you're able to like reunite with your soul, right? I've also been told that time and space doesn't exist for them. So like when they show up and they're giving you the toolbox, it was probably like no time at all for them, you know, but for us, it was like spread out.
Time and space are not real. They're both concepts people have made to make them feel better that they understand what's happening and what's going on around them. Perspective is a huge lesson that I think is like the biggest lesson they teach us from the other side. They know all, they see it all, they know what's going on. But we're not supposed to as humans. People tend to try to learn all the things and all the stuff. And I do believe we should try to learn something new every day and always be curious and always be a student. But we're not supposed to understand everything right now. If we did, we couldn't be present. As a human, we're not physically capable of understanding everything. And that's okay. Whenever we transition back out, we're able to kind of shake it off. And it's like, wow, that was a really cool class I just took. It's very different, very, very different.
I've definitely heard that there's our human perspective, which is not that broad because it's still, you know, we're human, but once we reach the other side, it's like that lifetime was a learning experience, and now on to the next. Yeah.
It's literally like going to kindergarten. And then you transition to the next one.
That's so fascinating. One of the reasons why I'm less afraid of death, because I do think it's going to be exactly like you said. It's like you're releasing what was here, and then there's going to be something else, but it's all light and love and all that.
Yeah, it's very different than what we experience here.
Do you believe that we all have a purpose here? Like we all have gifts that we're meant to tap into and share?
I think we all have experiences we're supposed to have. I don't know if you haven't dived or kind of like taken a dive into soul charts and like soul prints and stuff like that. But I definitely think we all have jobs that we're supposed to have and experiences we're supposed to have and lessons we're supposed to learn. But again, I really think our purpose in life isn't one thing. It's part of our everyday life. It's part of those little miracles that we see happen every day. We don't know what anybody else in the world is going through. And so us going through our day and holding that door for somebody, that was our purpose. Like we don't know what they were going through. We don't know what was going on in their mind. They may not even seen us. Us paying attention and taking an extra 2 or 3 seconds at that stoplight and not going, that was our purpose, because if we hadn't, we might have hit that guy that just walked right in front of us. So we really have to really be present every single day and find what your purpose is every day. It's not just one big thing. I promise it's not just one big thing. I don't think I've ever looked back with a client and had them look back and be like, oh, well, I'm so proud of myself because I did this one job. It's never about that. It's never, ever about that. So try to not focus so much on the big thing and feel what your soul's purpose is day to day and see what it feels like and what changes need to be made every day.
I really love that. Just sometimes even like the smallest interactions with someone could be like such a big impact on them.
Right. I mean, tell the little dandelion that's popping out of a concrete sidewalk. It had to go through a lot of work to get there. That is a whole miracle. Like that, it really is. I think people try to look at a big picture through a little keyhole, and it's not possible.
Have you seen the movie Soul, the Disney movie Soul?
Yes, we watched it. That was so good. So good. So good.
That was the message in that.
We're a super nerdy, geeky group at my house. Like we use movie references a lot with readings. And if people go and watch Men in Black 2, there's a guy named Griff, and he explains how reality isn't real and time and space aren't real. And I'm like, no, that's legit. Like, I don't know who hired him and who wrote his character, but they were literally trying to give everybody a heads up, like, this is what it really is. So I always tell people, like, no, go watch Griff. He'll tell you, like, is what it is. Everything is these beautiful little pieces of like synchronicity that are all happening, and there's no accidents and there's no mistakes. It's very cool. It's a really cool perspective.
So question, this is a little bit off topic, but do you believe in free will? Do you think it's all fated, or do you think it's a combination?
We are absolutely given the gift of free will. And that's what's so crazy is when people go in to see a psychic or something and they're like, this is your fate, no matter what, end all be all. I'm like, take your money and run. They are lying to you. That's not it. Your path changes 500 times a day. With every breath, every thought, every word you speak, your path changes and it shifts, period. Again, I will reference my super geeky self. If they go and watch Griff, he explains there's a moment where you can literally look it up on YouTube. There's a moment where he's standing at a Major League Baseball game and he's explaining if this person's mother, because she had a second glass of wine, she ended up getting pregnant with a girl instead of a boy. And because of this, like all these little things happen because it's all these little moments of free will that change everything every single day. And it's a really powerful like minute and a half. I think everyone should watch it. And it really explains free will and how reality is not what we think it is.
I'm definitely gonna look that up later.
Do it. I'm always referencing Griff. I'm like, he's the best. I just want to hang out with him. Like he's the best character to ever be created. It's really incredible. There's no such thing as set in stone. There's really not.
Yeah. What I do, so the way that I describe it, because like personally, even though I'm a tarot reader, I don't do predictive readings, and I'm really upfront about that. I can kind of tell you what I did as of right now, but I even tell them that that's just right now energetically where
That's
you're
right
at.
now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And so that can absolutely change, so what I like to focus on is more like, instead of telling you what's to come, I want to tell you what you need to know now, the tools now to help you get where you want to go. Now is all we have. So what's the point of telling you what's to come? And instead I could tell you something that you can work through now. And so, but I don't want to dismiss those that are more, like that can see into the future too, because I do believe that there's that as well. But I don't think it's that's set in stone. I think it's a timeline.
Absolutely. Right? I was doing tarot readings in like high school, and like that's like the natural thing to do, right? As somebody like this when we're younger. And I will tell everybody, like, this is what it says now. I have clients that get readings done every 6 months just to see how it shifts. A really cool thing that like you could probably really get into it is palmistry is really wild. We did a few workshops on palmistry a few years ago, and every 2 weeks my students had to take a palm print. And so every 2 weeks they were having to I had a black piece of paper because it stands out better this way. But you take a black piece of paper or white and you do a handprint of the opposite, black or white. And you will see where your palm literally changes constantly because all the little spots on your hand are tied directly to your brain. So when your thoughts change things, you manifest things, you shift your perspective, your palms will change too. So it's a really great way to see like an actual like tangible evidence that life changes constantly. So try that. It's a really cool like technique to give people something, being like, holy crap, I see where it's changed. And it's just kind of a good little lesson on free will and how nothing's set in concrete.
I love that. And you said weekly?
We did a workshop. It was every 2 weeks you changed it because it would give it enough time to make a shift. But you'll notice, you'll check it once a year and it'll be drastically different.
I'm going to have to do that.
We have a VIP group that we do. It's like $75 for the year, and you get access all year long. We do free workshops. You get early bird tickets to events and classes we're doing. But one of the workshops we do is a palmistry workshop. It's like a little 1 month course. It's a lot of fun. It's a really great thing. We did a tarot class 2 years ago where I think tarot is one of those things where people think you have to have this book and this deck and you got to follow. I'm like, no, we don't do that here. Like, we don't do that here. I don't use the books. I don't do that. So instead of just getting like the first time we did it for like the year and the day thing where you had to get really close with your cards and understand what they meant to you, the following year we did it where we created your entire deck completely on your own. So everybody's deck was completely different. And it was a lot of work and a really big commitment, but it was so much fun. Like, it was so cool. And everybody that attended that class has their very own printed tarot deck that nobody else will have, but they understand it better than any tarot deck you'll ever buy. And I think it's such a cool thing to do. It's a fun thing to do. So those workshops to me are always a good time.
That's amazing. I'm very similar. Like I read tarot for several years before I went professional, and I used the book or I'd Google, right? But it was always, I don't know what felt right. I was using my intuition, not just, so I was able to pick and choose. But I think even then I was kind of doubting myself. Like, am I just picking what I want to pick? Or, have you heard of Lindsay Mack?
I don't think so.
She's a tarot reader, and she has a podcast, and I discovered her, and she does what she calls soul tarot. So it's not, her interpretations are different from like traditional. They're similar but different, and those interpretations resonated so much that all of a sudden like really had it memorized in a day through like her basis, and also I think getting the permission, like I don't have to read, like the king and the queen is like a person, and I can read it as energy, like it just gives me to listen to myself. And then that was what did it. I was able to be like, you know what, I'm going to listen to what's coming to me, because it's not always going to be the meaning of the card. Sometimes that changes in the middle of a reading too.
Yeah, tarot cards started off as like playing cards. Like that's where we started. So we didn't have like specific things, but divination has so many forms. It's endless.
This has been such a fun conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today and letting me ask all these different questions. If our listeners want to work with you, how can they find you?
We are kind of everywhere. I try to meet my clients wherever they need to be. So it's always DominiqueOGorman.com. We have all our links: Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. You can just shoot me an email on my website. We're literally everywhere. Yeah, anytime. We do one-on-one clients. We do group readings, and location doesn't matter. We have clients all over the world. I have a client here in a few hours that's based out of Italy. So our timing is weird. My nighttime is her daytime. So doesn't matter. Everything's virtual. We also have some cool expos coming up. We'll be in Georgia. We'll be in New Jersey in November, working with New Jersey Paranormal. So yeah, we're kind of everywhere.
I will be sure to put all that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Yes, it was. It was so good talking to you.
Thank you for joining me on another inspiring episode. Remember, your purpose is a unique and unfolding path. I hope these conversations have ignited a spark within you. Until next time, keep exploring, growing, and embracing the beautiful adventure of connecting with your purpose. Stay tuned for more meaningful conversations. If you enjoyed the episode today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for joining me on this journey.